Have you ever wondered why it feels easier to follow the movement of many than to listen to the quiet truth within yourself? Why a crowd's excitement can make the heart beat faster, even when you don't genuinely want what they want? Why fear, outrage, or desire spreads from person to person as effortlessly as wind through tall grass? If you pause long enough, you will notice this pattern everywhere. Long queues forming before dawn for the newest device, people buying what others buy, simply to avoid feeling left behind. Voices rising in anger online until that same heat begins to settle into your own chest, even though none of it touches your real life. These moments are not signs of human weakness, only signs of how sensitive the mind is, how easily it absorbs emotion, imitation, and expectation before it has time to recognize what it is doing. Yet beneath all this noise lies something much quieter, a stillness that does not rush, a knowing that does not imitate, a clarity untouched by trends or collective emotion. Many overlook it because crowds are louder and movement feels more certain when shared. But loudness is not wisdom. Repetition is not truth. And the agreement of many has never guaranteed clarity. When the mind begins to notice the pull of the crowd, not judging it, not fighting it, simply seeing it, a small but powerful space appears. In that space, confusion eases, the heart becomes lighter, and you begin to recognize what is borrowed from others and what truly belongs to you. Awakening begins in moments like this, in the courage to see clearly, in the gentleness to pause before reacting, in the honesty of asking yourself, is this truly mine? Nothing dramatic is required, no force, no grand declarations, only a soft turning inward, toward awareness, toward truth, toward the freedom that arises when the mind stops drifting with the world and starts recognizing its own path. The ancient instinct, how the crowd becomes our compass. Walk through any busy street, scroll through any platform, or listen to any gathering of people today, and a subtle pattern reveals itself. Most speak in echoes, repeating what has already been said, believing what has already been believed, wanting what others have already wanted. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. Someone buys a new device, and suddenly crowds appear before sunrise, convinced the object holds something essential. A trend begins, and without pausing, countless people rush to follow it as if falling into step with a marching rhythm they never consciously chose. Even rejection is borrowed. What the crowd dismisses becomes easy to dismiss, even before understanding why. This pull toward imitation is ancient. The mind is built to sense approval, to seek safety in numbers, to avoid standing alone. In earlier times, belonging to the group meant survival. But what once protected, now often imprisons. In a modern world overflowing with choice, noise, and influence, that instinct can lead people to live by reflex rather than reflection. Opinions spread like sparks in dry grass, not because they're true, but because they are shared. Emotions ripple from one person to another, shaping reactions before awareness has time to awaken. A stranger's outrage becomes your tension. A crowd's excitement becomes your desire. A trend's popularity becomes your belief that you must participate. When the movement of many becomes the mind's compass, something quiet but important begins to fade. The ability to feel one's own direction. The inner voice that once spoke softly but clearly becomes buried under layers of borrowed urgency. The natural curiosity that helps a person examine life with fresh eyes becomes dulled by repetition. Even values, once lived with sincerity, start to bend under the weight of social expectation. Without noticing, actions are taken not because they align with understanding, but because they align with others. This is not a judgment on people. It is simply a recognition of how the mind behaves when it is not aware of its own movement. The pull of the crowd is comforting, even intoxicating. It promises belonging without requiring clarity. It offers a sense of certainty without requiring investigation. It makes choices feel easier because they are inherited rather than discovered. Yet the cost is subtle, a quiet drifting away from authenticity. When people follow trends without pausing, their choices lose depth. When they echo opinions without observing, their understanding becomes thin. When they move with the crowd without question, their lives begin to reflect the world's restlessness rather than their own wisdom. And the more this happens, the harder it becomes to recognize that the steering wheel of the mind has been handed over, not to truth, but to momentum. Still, even in this drift, something within remains aware. There's a gentle discomfort that whispers when a decision does not feel entirely one's own. There's a moment of questioning when the excitement around you seems louder than the meaning within you. There's a subtle pull toward clarity, urging you to see more deeply into the forces shaping your thoughts, choices, and reactions. This recognition is the beginning of freedom, not rebellion, not resistance, simply awareness, an inner turning toward the truth of what influences you, so that your steps can once again be your own. The hidden cost, emotional contagion, and the toll of unawareness. When people drift with the crowd, the movement often feels harmless. After all, everyone seems to be doing the same thing. Everyone is buying the same product, reacting to the same headlines, following the same trend, or carrying the same emotion. It feels normal. It feels safe. But the effects are not always visible on the surface. They settle deeper, quietly shaping the mind, the heart, and the way you move through the world. One of the most powerful forces at work is emotional contagion. The mind absorbs emotion far more easily than most realize. Fear spreads faster than facts. Anger spreads faster than reason. Excitement spreads faster than understanding. A crowd's mood can enter the body without consent, shaping reactions before awareness even notices something has entered. A wave of online outrage can tighten the chest, even though the issue has nothing to do with your life. A group's anxiety can make you feel unsafe, even when your surroundings are completely secure. This is not imagination. It is the natural sensitivity of the human mind, an unfolding of what the Buddha described as dependent arising, paticca samuppada, one cause giving rise to another, a chain of feeling and reaction that spreads quietly, shaping perception before the mind even realizes it. The modern world magnifies this pressure in ways previous generations never knew. Voices are louder, reactions are faster, and trends move with the speed of lightning. If someone somewhere becomes outraged, the ripple reaches you within seconds. If a product becomes desirable, desire flows toward you before the mind has time to question whether it adds anything meaningful to life. People line up in long queues for objects that lose value soon after they are unboxed, not because they truly need them, but because collective desire creates an illusion of necessity. This is not consumption. This is conditioning. And conditioning always carries a cost. The cost appears first as exhaustion, an exhaustion that does not come from physical effort, but from carrying emotions that do not belong to you. Many feel tired without knowing why. Tired of being pulled into conflicts that offer no peace. Tired of chasing trends that offer no fulfillment. Tired of agreeing with others simply to avoid tension. This fatigue is the weight of living a life shaped by external momentum rather than inner clarity. There is also the cost of manipulation, subtle, invisible, and deeply embedded in modern life. In the modern world, whole systems exist to study the mind's impulses. Their purpose is not to help it slow down, but to hurry it along toward wanting, reacting, consuming. Marketing campaigns are crafted to bypass reflection and speak directly to instinct. Algorithms are designed to amplify emotion, not truth. What gains attention is rarely what brings wisdom. It is what provokes reaction. As reactions intensify, attention becomes captured. And once attention is captured, direction becomes influenced. This influence is rarely malicious. It is simply the nature of systems built to sustain themselves. But when the mind does not notice the influence, it becomes vulnerable to confusion. It begins to mistake noise for knowledge, trends for values, and emotional pressure for personal conviction. The problem is not that people follow the crowd. The problem is that they often do so without seeing the forces that push them. This is a subtle form of moha, delusion, and avijja, unawareness. The mind drifting without seeing clearly, absorbing desires and opinions that are not truly its own, mistaking the momentum of the many for guidance. Even cultural and social expectations add to the weight. Every society carries unwritten rules about what success should look like, what happiness should resemble, what people should pursue, reject, admire, or fear. These expectations shape behavior long before conscious thought enters the picture. If everyone values the same symbols of status, there is pressure to value them too. If everyone dismisses certain ideas, there is pressure to dismiss them even without personal understanding. Without awareness, culture becomes a silent architect of the mind. And so the toll grows emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The mind becomes cluttered with borrowed anxieties. The heart becomes restless from trying to maintain pace with movements that were never chosen. The spirit becomes dim beneath the weight of expectations that cannot nourish it. People may continue functioning, but they feel an emptiness that no trend can fill, a quiet ache that no purchase can soothe, a sense of drifting even while surrounded by others. Here lies tanha, craving, and upadana, clinging in action, wanting, grasping, and holding onto objects, trends, or approval that cannot truly satisfy. Craving leads to clinging, and clinging leads inevitably to dissatisfaction, or dukkha, suffering, even in a world of abundance. What is most striking is that many do not recognize the source of their suffering. There's a sense that something is missing, but the shape of the missing piece remains unclear. There's a feeling of overwhelm, but the mind cannot trace its origins. And so people follow more trends, seeking relief in the very places that create the pressure. But relief does not come from more noise. It comes from seeing the noise for what it is. When a person becomes aware of the subtle toll of conformity, something shifts. The weight becomes visible. The pressures become recognizable. The emotions of others no longer slip into the mind unnoticed. In that clarity, the possibility of inner freedom quietly awakens. This is the practice of sati, mindfulness, awareness as liberation. Simply seeing the mind's movement, observing influence without attachment, brings a gentle freedom that is quiet yet profound. The Buddha taught that liberation arises first in noticing, in pausing, in attending with clarity to the currents, shaping thought, feeling, and action. The path of clarity, cultivating discernment over reflex. When the pull of the crowd is strong, it can feel almost impossible to step aside. People notice the rhythm of those around them, the laughter, the approval, the disapproval, and feel a subtle compulsion to move in step. The mind seeks belonging because it has long relied on the presence of others to feel safe and recognized. But belonging gained through imitation is fragile, and it often comes at the cost of clarity and authenticity. True steadiness, the kind that leaves the heart unshaken, arises not from following, but from discerning. Discernment begins with observation. To observe fully is to notice not only what others are doing, but also how it affects you. When someone's excitement makes your pulse quicken, when a trend triggers longing or anxiety, or when collective anger stirs tension within, there is a subtle signal. Pause and look carefully. These feelings are not the enemy. They are information. They reveal where influence has entered unnoticed, where habits of imitation have taken root, where the mind is drifting in response to the movement of many, rather than the clarity of its own perception. In Buddhist terms, this is a quiet practice of sati, mindfulness, noticing the flow of influence and emotion without becoming entangled in it. Observation alone is not enough. The next step is evaluation. Ask, does this movement, this trend, this opinion align with what has been discerned as true in your own experience? Does it serve the life that is being cultivated, the calm that is being nurtured, the clarity that is being sustained? This is not a question of judgment toward others, but a gentle inquiry into your own mind. Evaluation is an act of care, a moment to examine the alignment between impulse and understanding, between habit and intention. It is the practice of seeing beyond moha, delusion, and avijja, unawareness, acknowledging the subtle forces that guide reaction and choosing to step into clarity instead. Only then comes action, deliberate and measured. The choice may be to follow, to engage, or to remain apart, but it is no longer blind. When action arises from observation and reflection, it carries a different quality. There is steadiness, even when the world around moves rapidly. There is calm, even in the midst of frenzy. There is freedom, because the step is taken from clarity rather than compulsion. In this way, discernment becomes a quiet form of liberation, a gentle unbinding of the mind from the momentum of the many. In daily life, the practice shows itself in small, practical moments, noticing the subtle tension when people around react with fear or anger, recognizing the impulse to join simply to belong, pausing before liking, buying, or commenting, and asking quietly if this is truly the step to take. These moments, while ordinary, are profound. Each pause, each careful reflection, strengthens the capacity to move through life without losing touch with the inner compass. Discernment does not reject the world, nor does it withdraw from life. It does not demand grand gestures or dramatic statements. It simply cultivates the ability to respond from understanding rather than reflex, to choose engagement when it nourishes and distance when it preserves clarity. Where once the heart was pulled by every trend, every opinion, every rising wave of emotion, there now emerges a quiet center that does not need to compete, imitate, or prove. This center does not cling to the crowd, yet it is not separate from it. It moves with awareness, guided by a steady inner measure. Over time, discernment transforms the ordinary experience of life. Observation, evaluation, and deliberate action gradually reshape the inner landscape. The mind becomes sensitive to influence without being captive to it, open to the world without being overwhelmed, responsive without being reactive. In this steady seeing, the inner life deepens. The heart becomes anchored, the mind becomes clear, and freedom, not loud or dramatic, but subtle and enduring, begins to reveal itself. Through this careful practice, the inner rhythm begins to govern movement. The mind moves with awareness, and the pull of the crowd is met with insight rather than instinct. True freedom lies within the quiet power of your inner compass. Freedom is rarely found in the noise of the world. It does not arrive through trends, approval, or belonging, nor does it come from the accumulation of possessions, accolades, or attention. The movements of the crowd may seem powerful, urgent, or irresistible, but their influence is external. True freedom arises when the mind stops taking direction from what is not its own and begins to notice the subtle currents shaping thought, feeling, and action, following the guidance of its own inner compass rather than the momentum of the crowd. In daily life, this is visible everywhere. People chase fleeting approval, waiting for recognition, swayed by the desires and judgments of others. Cues form for objects that bring no lasting satisfaction. Social media amplifies every emotion, fear, envy, excitement, until it feels personal, even when it belongs to someone else. People argue, compare, compete, and react, rarely pausing to ask if the impulse belongs to them or is borrowed from the movement around them. The mind, left unchecked, drifts, and the heart carries the weight of many invisible pressures. The first step toward freedom is noticing. Seeing clearly the subtle ways influence enters, how emotions are mirrored, how trends guide desire, how expectations shape action, is the beginning of liberation. Observation itself creates a space between impulse and response, allowing the mind to breathe, pause, and recalibrate. This is a practice of mindfulness, the gentle, unhurried attention that the Buddha described as the doorway to insight and liberation. It is not resistance or detachment from life. It is attentiveness, a quiet turning inward that illuminates the forces shaping perception and clarifies the path forward. The next step is alignment. When awareness touches influence, the mind can choose deliberately, guided by clarity rather than compulsion. It evaluates. Is this truly meaningful? Does this nourish the life being cultivated? Does this align with a deeper understanding that remains steady even as the world rushes past? This process transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for conscious action. Buying, speaking, reacting, or remaining silent all become deliberate, infused with understanding rather than driven by momentum. In Buddhist terms, it is the recognition that tanha, craving, and upadana, clinging, creates suffering, and that freedom comes when desire and attachment are observed and understood, not blindly followed. Freedom deepens further when the mind cultivates inner steadiness. In this state, belonging is no longer a necessity. Approval is no longer a measure of worth. The fluctuations of social currents no longer disturb the heart. Choices are taken from a place of clarity, not fear, from a place of presence, not reaction, from a place of understanding, not imitation. Life continues to unfold externally, yet internally, a quiet sovereignty arises. Even in crowds, one may move with discernment. Even amid noise, the mind may remain steady. Even when others are carried by emotion, the inner life can remain untouched by borrowed tides. This freedom is not dramatic or loud. It does not demand recognition, nor does it boast of courage. It is subtle, patient, and enduring. It is the quiet knowledge that every step can be chosen, every thought observed, every emotion held lightly, rather than carried unconsciously. It is the soft power of clarity, the gentle authority of awareness, the profound security of knowing the mind can act from its own understanding, rather than drift with the impulse of others. In practical terms, it can appear in small ways. Pausing before joining a conversation fueled by outrage. Noticing the subtle tension that arises when people around react with fear. Resisting the impulse to mimic a trend simply because it is popular, and choosing action only when it resonates with a deeper understanding. In these small moments, the mind practices freedom. In these moments, the heart is freed from exhaustion, envy, and fear. In these moments, life becomes not a series of reactive steps, but a conscious unfolding. Each choice rooted in clarity, each action reflecting awareness, and each breath reminding that true freedom lies quietly within. Observing without attachment, choosing without compulsion, and moving through life with clarity and care. This is liberation in practice, gentle yet profound, ordinary yet deeply transformative, guided always by the inner compass. If this wisdom resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to join us on the path of conscious living.